Another way the Prophet ﷺ addressed people's errors and mistakes was to do it indirectly, in the sense that we do not confront the person individually, but rather we deal with the issue in general term, so that this will be sufficient. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. For example, the companions reported an incident, and the Prophet ﷺ would address the public about this topic without referring to who did it. So, for instance, the Prophet ﷺ sees someone spit on the wall in the direction of the Qibla. He was angered about that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he addressed this to the public. In another incident, the Prophet hears about three of the companions who said that the Prophet ﷺ was forgiven all previous and upcoming futuristic sins, which we've mentioned in the previous video. So he is not like us. So I would not sleep and pray all night long. I would not eat and fast all year long. I would not marry women and enjoy. The Prophet ﷺ addressed this issue publicly. Why do people say such things? I pray and I eat and I marry women. Whoever desires to follow a way that is not from me, then he is not among me. So the Prophet ﷺ did not name them. Similarly, when he sent one of his companions to collect zakat, and they went to the different tribes and cities and came back, this person said, "This is your zakat money, this is my portion. They gave it to me as a gift." So when you give an official from under the table, and they want him to favour you, to allow you, to prevent you from a fine, so he received this money, it would be a major sin, as it was bribery. The Prophet ﷺ addressed this issue publicly about the bribe when collecting zakat money without saying who said it. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why is it that we employ people to do public work, and they back to us and say, this is zakat money and this was given to me? Why did they not sit in their parents' home, and would they notice that anyone would give you anything? They wouldn't give it unless you were a government official or a worker, as you have those credentials and signature that gives you authority. Otherwise, you would not distribute money to the neighborhood. This form of correcting people's mistakes and not confronting the people is one of the ways of the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes addressing the gathering without pinpointing, rather reminding them about Allah's wrath and the torment of Allah, is an efficient way of not only providing benefit for the person that have done it, but rather it is also gathering the masses so they can understand and also learn from this as well, so they can avoid such mistakes. This is because this would avoid any negative reaction if you address the person face to face, because Satan may provoke them to reply and retaliate and react in a form of self-avenge to get even. Also, when you give a general advice, it's more appealing to the people, as also concealing people's sins and increases the love for the teacher and the advice giver. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is not so generic and cannot be applied to all cases. You have to address the problem head on. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did this. You have to weigh the pros and cons and choose the lesser of two evils. So, for example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given a Friday sermon, and the person comes and is stepping over people's shoulders in the first line in the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ once saw a man doing this, jumping over people's necks and shoulders, and he interrupted his sermon and said to the man sitting for you, "You are late and you are annoying people. First you are late and then added insult to injury. Sit where there is a spot." He addressed a particular individual in this situation. As in the hadith of Sadiq or Radafani, when the Prophet also was given khutbah al-Jumu'ah, and he saw Sadiq coming and sitting and interrupting the khutbah, and said, "Sadiq, did you pray the 2 rakats?" And he said, "No." Then he said, "Pray 2 rakats." These are the At-Tahiyatul Masjid, the 2 rakats that you read. The Prophet ﷺ said in authentic hadith, if one of you was to sit down before that, you should read the 2 rakats. So when you enter the masjid, read 2 rakats and then sit down. So if you're planning on sitting down, you should read At-Tahiyatul Masjid. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ was addressing here, that even though the Jummah khutbah was going on, you still need to read your At-Tahiyatul Masjid and then sit down, listen to the khutbah, and that's what you have to do. And this is what the Prophet was addressing here. Also, another way of the Prophet's dealings of addressing people's mistakes and errors, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is to provoke public opinion against the one who has made the mistake. Some mistakes do need punishment and to be counted in the same way of the mistake. One of the major sins is to annoy your neighbours, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. If you believe in Allah on the last day, he must honour his neighbours. It is a ritual in our religion that lots of Muslims have neglected. A man once came to the Prophet ﷺ complaining of his nature, such harm as throwing hot garbage, taking his car spot and making loud noises. So the man kept on coming to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Be patient, be tolerant, he is your neighbour." So the Prophet said ﷺ, after 3 times of the man's complaint, he said, "If this is the case and he stops this and he's not stopping this harm to you as a neighbour, take your furniture and put it on the road." So the man did so. The people walking by said, "Why is the furniture on the road?" He kept on saying, "My neighbour has done things to me, and the Prophet ﷺ told me to do this." The moment the people heard of this, the neighbour's harm, and the Prophet ﷺ was the one who told him to do this, they started to curse the neighbour because they knew he was a transgressor. And when the neighbour saw the people cursing him and making dua against him, he realised the gravity of his mistake and the negative dua by Allah would never harm you, but this was required due to the man's huge mistake. The Prophet ﷺ, if one can afford it, delays payment, his honour and punishment becomes permissible. His honour, his reputation, you could sit in gatherings, you can tarnish his reputation. The individual took money from you, you can say that is totally halal. You have to do this when people don't have fear of Allah and need the public to curse them and tarnish their reputation. You can public shame, and then you can open the eyes of those who do injustice with you, but you need to weigh the pros and cons based on the ways of the Prophet ﷺ and consult proper scholars of Islam on issues like this, so you can get the right opinion and take the right course of action. I'll leave you here for Manillah. Wa sallallahu wa baraka ala nabina Muhammad. Astaghfirullah. I'll catch you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.